Okay, says it's preparing. For people watching the recording, hang out for a second while we do a little housekeeping. Need to share some links. All right, it is coming. Almost there. I've got the link to the YouTube live. I'm gonna share that on the Twitter. Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee meeting. Today is September 28th. I am Chris Troutner. Let's go ahead and do a round of introductions. I'll start with myself. I'm Chris Troutner. I founded the PSF. I also run fullstack.cash, which is infrastructure and app development services in the Bitcoin Cash, eCash, and Avalanche blockchains. Aaron Shoemaker, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Aaron Shoemaker. I work with Metaverse 360, well, really WebXR in integration and blockchain stuff. So yeah, working with the SLPs, and we got those 3D NFTs up on your NFT viewer this weekend. So that was very cool. And I think that's in the PSF chat, so people can actually click on that. And when you click on those, they'll download and you can load them into a GLTIF viewer or a GLB viewer and check them out.
Yeah, I've got them queued. We'll definitely be looking at those today. Go ahead, Aaron Sundman.
Greetings, Aaron Sundman here. Big fan of the Permissionless Software Foundation. Again, specifically, and I'll say this probably every time, the idea of permissionless innovation is what allows for things to actually move forward outside of like prescribed actions by governments and or companies. So excited to be a part of this, especially since you're taking this idea of not just BCH, Bitcoin Cash, but also eCash and Avalanche and expanding the universe in this. So thanks for doing it, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Glad to have you be a part of it. Go ahead, Stoyan.
My name is Stoyan Zhekov, and I am helping with some of the JavaScript libraries on the backend and front end for our projects.
Nice. All right. Well, with that, I will share my screen and we'll move into the agenda for today. So as always, As always, the agenda is on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation GitHub group in a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee. And we file all of our agendas as issues. So this is number 40. The scope of the meeting covers the cache stack, the pay-to-write database, and the various dexes on the different chains. And if anybody wants to find out more, there is documentation links right here. So yeah, let's jump into it. Update on the token dex. So in our last meeting, we started discussing all this mutable and immutable data around tokens, and we talked about, we should really create a specification for the types of data that are going in that. So I created over the last couple of weeks PS7 token data schema, and so that is also on GitHub under our specifications repository, and it's PS007. And basically, what this is starting to I really want this to be a collaborative effort, but I just took a stab at it to get the ball rolling. And what this is describing is common schema or common data properties that would go into the mutable and immutable data. And if we specify it, it means that, like, if Aaron is building, his NFT system, he doesn't need to ask me, what am I using? Because we're all going to follow a common standard, and that makes the tokens interoperable. They exist on their own on the blockchain, independent of any particular app, and then we're all developing apps to interact with these assets that can move from platform to platform. So just to dive in here, at currently the list is pretty small, and I think, less is more in this regard, as long as it's future proofed and there's room to grow. So there's two big chunks of data in these tokens. There's the immutable data and the mutable data. So immutable means it cannot change, and mutable means that it can change. So in the context of immutable data, we have to be really careful about the data, because once it's there, and you can't change it. So these are sort of the initial properties that I called out. There's a schema version, which just references this specification. So that just lets, either humans or software know what schema to follow. Oh, and by the way, guys, jump in here, interrupt me at any time. Don't let me just keep going on if you have a question or concern or comment. There's a Go ahead.
This is great, because just describing it in the beginning is really what's necessary, because I think that most people will not have spent a lot of time thinking about these kind of data protocols. So this is great.
Yeah, and by doing it this way and doing it on GitHub, we can collaborate and keep say it's like just the code versioning control, and we can know, who changed what when, and hopefully why, if they left a comment. So getting back to the immutable data, so it calls out a schema, it calls out a date created. And I hesitated over this one because the block in which the token is created will also be a timestamp, but it's not necessarily reference to time like humans think of time. It's reference to block height. And so that's why I thought, it probably is actually better just to do a timestamp.
I also think it's a good idea, because it's possible that you attempted to put something in and it didn't get in that block. So even though, it might be in half an hour, like right now, Bitcoin Cash is not a busy blockchain in terms of, but who knows what's going in the future. And so if you're trying to say, yes, it certainly made it into the third block from here, but this is the time that I put it in, I think it's worth at least recording.
Yeah.
Also, it's good because the usual way you put this timestamp in the JSON file, because it's always different. So when you upload it to the IPFS, it will create a new SID for you. If you just upload always the same data, it will just not create the new IPFS.
Right.
So you can use somebody else IPFS and it can disappear. So yeah, including some variable in the JSON file is a good idea.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
those are both good points. Yeah. So real quick, so these four I called out here in the description. I'm just kind of verbally going over them. These four are required and these two are optional, and I'll cover these next, but these two optional ones, because the immutable data takes up the document URL field in the SLP token, that's typically where people put a URL like this.
Right.
So this allows that same data to be captured in the immutable data that we've essentially hacked on top of. So that's why these exist. They're optional. They just let people put in a little more context into who issued it and where to find more info.
So one thing I was hoping for is somewhere to keep the SHA-256 in the immutable data. Now I realize you could do it as an optional, but like we were kind of talking about, if creating something like this shouldn't rely on my server or your server or anyone else, it should be provably the same as when it was originally put out there. So the question is now, to me, that should not go in mutable data. It should go in immutable data, because this was the original. Now you could also say, hey, we updated it and we put a new version out there or something and put it in mutable data. But is it possible to add something in that's optional or non-optional with regard? I mean, I think it probably should be non-optional. I mean, it should be optional, because I don't think everyone's going to have a SHA-256 hash of a file, of the original file. What's your take?
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is how are you?
Security. Yeah.
So you're talking about a use case where the token represents a file and you want to capture the SHA-256 fingerprint of that file in the token data.
Yeah. So here's an example of when this is extremely important from the perspective of trusting what we're doing here, is this idea of protecting against deep fakes. I think the problem that we have coming is this social upheaval because of deep fakes are going to be any 13-year-old will be able to create anybody saying anything they want, and trying to get to a point where we can say, well, no, it's hard enough to say that that something didn't happen, right? That's near impossible. But to say something did actually happen is actually really quite impossible right now, because no one trusts media, no one trusts most anything. So if at least we can have the blockchain become a public good and have some file put out there in IPFS and provably the same as when it was put out there, I think we can start to adjust how we deal with deep fakes when they start to really cause a problem. And so that's why, one of the reasons why, but there are others.
Yeah, well, that sounds like an important application. And in fact, we're doing something similar to that at Launchpad IP. And we are actually putting the SHA-256 fingerprint of the original file in the immutable data. But that's a pretty narrow use case from my perspective. I think that this is just trying to keep this more general and generic. That data is probably more appropriate to go into either the user data or the JSON LD data. And so they're required, but they're only required to be an empty object. And this is sort of how I'm trying to future-proof this schema, as well as provide options for more specific use cases. So that while they're required fields, they're not required to have anything in them other than an empty object. But other than that, they're not specified. So the idea behind the user data is exactly what you're talking about. Is like, if you have an application that's using tokens to capture files and give some authenticity to it, that would be a perfect piece of data to put into the user data, and you can put it in there however you want. And then the JSON LD is basically the same idea, but it's just specifically for JSON linked data. And in that section, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent on this, but anybody who wants to understand more about JSON linked data and the schema.org schema, this is the original Web3. This is the original semantic web proposed by Tim Berners-Lee, who created the web. This was his original vision of Web3, was a semantic web. Where we'd have all this linked data, and then computers could essentially get context from the data and understand, like, oh, this data represents a person, and that data represents a book, and this person possesses that book, based on the schema and the structure. And so anybody who wants to like go down that particular rabbit hole, that's what that field is for. And it's very flexible. But it provides just enough structure to provide the possibility that someone could like create. And this actually is a very fascinating history behind this technology, because it was like proposed, there was a lot of work, and then it kind of died for a few years. And then Google realized, like, oh, we need to be able to allow people to, when they create web pages and products on the web and stuff, we need them to be able to describe these things with microdata. And they sort of resuscitated this whole JSON linked data and the schema.org schema, for the purposes of search engines. And so that's largely how it's used today, which is actually a pretty good analogy, because I could definitely see this field as being the thing that some future search engine locks onto,
right?
In order to index these tokens and figure out, like, what is this token representing?
Go ahead.
I see both those fields as being potentials. Like the user data I see could be, say, game objects. You could actually reference a location where you could change attributes if that's how you wanted to adjust it. Instead of running transactions every time, you could say you're a game developer and these tokens are in your own ecosphere, and you want the ability to level up things or give people stuff. The user data object could be a place where you take care of that. And so that could point to a place where where I tell my program, get a JSON document from this location,
Mhm.
and whatever it says, those are the attributes of the game object and how it needs to interact in my world.
Yeah, that's a good insight because those two fields are also in the mutable data. And
Yeah.
that's exactly
Right.
what you just described, Aaron, is exactly what I'm planning on doing with the simple store protocol, where this token data goes into the store, which is a token, but then the actual products are just entries into the JSON LD mutable data
Gotcha.
of the token.
So this is sort of, yeah, that's neat. You're actually sort of innovating on the simple store protocol at the same time.
Yeah. So that's the idea is, so in that spec that I started writing out, like the store is the token, but the products are not, they can be, but they don't have to be tokens. They're just entries in this JSON LD field.
Yeah.
Chris, can I mention something?
Mhm.
There's something named JSONschema.org. Do you know about it?
Yeah, it's sort of a hybrid
it-
between JSON linked data and the schema.org. I think
So
instead
I will
of
post
it's a
here
replacement for
one.
schema.org.
I will post here one link when you have time to look on it. It's a way to describe what kind of fields have this JSON in a specific format. So you can use some ready tools after this to check if this file is in the specified format. So for example, now you have some required field. If you specify in this JSON schema that this field must present, after this you can use like linters and stuff like this to just check JSON file before uploading it. So all of the Uniswap token lists they have this kind of description. So every time before uploading some list, like JSON list, you can check it if it's, if it meets the requirements. So I think will be good if we have like JSON schema description of this JSON file that you are now using in the.
Yeah, so I have reviewed this in the past, and I would love to get more feedback on, because my understanding is that the JSON schema is a direct competitor to schema.org. That you can use one or the other. You can actually use them together. It just gets confusing because now you're trying to code to two different schemas.
I think this one is more for the JSON files. Maybe the schema is more common because I think when they created it, it mostly was about the RSS, Atom, and other protocols. But I think this JSON will be most specific for the JSON format files, which maybe will be better. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I definitely want help looking into this and seeing what would be good to incorporate. What I like about schema.org is that it's very noun centric. It's particularly when it comes to like businesses and products and works of art, and like they have very well defined, like schema.org is very oriented towards business, towards product, and like this is a thing and we need to describe it, and it has child things and a price, and so it lends itself very well to anything that involves like products or a marketplace. And I remember, like, it's been a while since I reviewed the JSON schema, but it seemed to be much more flexible and less product oriented. And it did seem like you could use both. And the deeper I got into it, it just seemed like, why use both? Because it seems like schema.org seemed to have everything that we needed and better defined. But I am totally open to researching this further. And so I'm glad you said something, because if there's synergy, let's explore it.
When I was creating like a token list for this smart BCH DEXs, so it was pretty convenient to describe like token lists, exactly like tokens that we are talking now about.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there was already tools. So for example, before every upload, I can put in my package JSON file something. I forgot exactly what, but you can do like what was this yarn test, and it will check your JSON file if it's, how to see, meet the requirements.
Yeah.
This was
So
very nice, I think.
so here's an example of some JSON schema I was able to find on their site, and it's so similar. And then in schema.org, they have the schema, and then so this is like a no markup example, a microdata example, an RDF example, and a JSON linked data example. And so they're they're both JSON. The main difference being that schema.org always has this context and then like a parent sort of parent level, and then it drills down into, so the product has an offer, and that offer has a price and a currency, and so all these fields are already like they're already there. Like you don't need to wonder what to call it because it's already specified. And so I'm assuming that JSON schema does a similar thing. And and that's what I mean when I say like they're a direct competitor to one another. So I'm up for, I'm totally open-minded on all this stuff. And really, it doesn't matter at this point if I mean, just because the only specification in here is that this property exists, and so you could just as easily use the JSON schema in this field. And I think, one of the things I really like about schema.org is one of the few things that they require is this context that lets you know right off the get-go that like, oh, okay, this is a schema.org schema. And so if there is some way that JSON schema identifies itself as like, this is the schema that we're following, some sort of reference, then, I think that's probably right here. Yeah, it's probably that JSON file.
No, the second line, I think.
Oh, this one here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so very similar. Oh, yeah, it's okay. Let's open that file.
So I want to just, go ahead. Yeah, you're still going.
No, go ahead. I'm just looking at this.
Oh, I just want to make sure that I follow and make sure that if we do have a SHA-256 fingerprint, that we use the same one and put it in the same place. So whether or not it's immutable or mutable, I'd want to make sure that I'm following that so that we don't collide. I realize that there's, deciding how to do all this stuff is even more important longer term. But I don't want to leave that like completely unsaid. So maybe just send or include what you have put in there, because I think it's important to align.
Yeah, that's a good use case, and I'm not sure the best way to capture this, but basically, from what I'm seeing in this JSON LD field, you could put either schema.org schema or JSON schema, and they're both going to have that call out.
Right.
So there's not going to, any computer reading this stuff's not going to have to guess. It'll just look for these, if it has this field, then it's a schema, a JSON schema. And if it has this field, then it's a schema.org schema.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then the user data again is just a free for all, whatever you want to do. So within the use case of representing a file with a token and using the immutable data to capture a fingerprint, that's probably worthy of its own specification for that use case. And in which case, like if it was me, I would find the schema.org schema that fits a file, and then
follow that. Gotcha.
And follow that schema, and then add a SHA-256 fingerprint property to that schema.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then that way, like you've kept the amount of sort of new stuff to a minimum,
right? And
you've left a breadcrumb trail of context for developers and software to follow.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we talked about the immutable data, and the mutable data is almost exactly the same, except or in the sense that it has these two same fields. It has the schema call out for the specification that's also required. It has the token icon, which we've discussed. This is what sort of the wallets that I've built latch onto to display the token icon. And then there's this full-sized URL property. And so if the token represents, say, a blog post, this would be the link to the blog post. Or if it's a 3D object, this would be the link to the actual object file, the GLD file. And what else did I? Well, so I'll just jump ahead and show how I'm using this. So this is, I'm calling this the NFT collector or NFT viewer. And so you can put a Bitcoin Cash address in here and hit go, and it'll pull up any NFTs that are held by that address. You can also pass it in as a query parameter in the URL, which is what I did here. And so this is an address that I've been populating with NFTs based on the schema that we were just looking at. We'll go back. I just want to show some of these properties. There's category. This is optional. Tags. This is also optional. And so when this comes up, maybe I can open it in a new tab.
Yeah, I
so
love the
can
ones
see.
you created. I was like, oh, I love these NFTs you created. I haven't seen some of those memes before. Oh, they said that was great.
So when it
sorry.
loads, it pulls up the NFTs, and they're all uncategorized by default, and it just pulls up like the basic information, and so they're all uncategorized, and it's going to go through and download the token data, and then look at some of this data that's in that specification, and then it'll end up looking like this. So this is after it's done loading. It'll look like this, where these three have a category of meme, these three have a category of book, and so in the full-size URL field, like for the memes, it's just the icon. So it just opens the same file as the icon. But in the books, this actually takes you to the PDF of the book. In the art case, in this case, if I had a full-size high-res image, it would take me to the full-size high-res image of the art. In the case of these news items, these were videos, so it actually loads the MP4 video file in another tab. And in the case of the 3D objects, the token icon is an animated GIF, and then the full-sized URL is the actual 3D file.
Nice.
And then for anybody that's watching, I will throw the link to, you can go to gltfviewer.donmccurdy.com, and it is just a simple viewer, and you can, I'm trying to copy that. They'll just copy this entire thing forward to permission.
Yeah, just drop a link in the Telegram chat.
Yep. So you can go to the viewer, and then so Chris is at that viewer. So Chris, if you pop in any one of those 3D objects, it will show on there. It's just a simple like online viewer thing. And then eventually, I want to work with, I've been talking with Chris about having it so that it's something that happens on the back end. So you click on it and it actually pops up. So we just have to look at how do we incorporate 3JS or Babylon.js GLB loader in and taking an IPFS object essentially. Right. And then another thing that I'm talking with Chris about is, can we make these GLBs extremely small as the token icon and have mini GLB loaders as the token icon? So the token icons themselves would also be 3D viewers, like actual 3D objects. And nobody else has that. Like not even OpenSea has that. OpenSea uses GIFs.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's exciting to see tools being made because I feel like it doesn't matter how much we can build as a really cool and easy to use NFT site that does 3D stuff. And if there's no way to use it, there's no way to display it, there's no way people can feel ownership, it's not going to become something.
yeah.
It's just going to be like this, like the way most people think of cryptocurrency of like, I don't know, they're out there. I don't even believe it because I can't touch it, right? It needs to have some sort of base in their head that I can go back and view it and show others.
Well, and
This
every
is
one of
great.
those other NFTs, like you click on the book, you see the book, you click on the video, you watch the video, but you click on the 3D object right now, you just download the 3D object instead of
Right.
seeing the 3D object, which is, we'll figure it out. I'm working with Chris. I take a look at his code, and then it's just about like, all right, do we create a React component that has the GLB viewer in it? And Stoyan, you've already gone through Babylon JS last week, so you might be able to crack this nut.
I wanted to ask, are these NFTs like the simple type that you described before? So fungible tokens, but with amount of one?
Yeah. Just for this, this app will display them equally, but the NFT creator, which I also wanted to show off next, it's right now it's just creating the simple NFTs, and then down the road, it's because it's a more complicated process to create a group token and then mint it and then spawn an NFT.
I
But
do
we'll get
have
there.
one more comment before you go on. So another thing to look at is with the video stuff, if you can scroll up to the videos, because it's using a simple player like within the browser, something for anybody that's out there, if you can take something like a JW player and allow it to load videos from IPFS, kind of like a Netflix style, now we have a tokenized video browser, essentially. Like you can browse, collect, and it acts like an iTunes did back in the day.
Yeah, so the thing I really want to drive home with you guys is the mechanics are super simple. It's like if you click on this video, it's just going to open a new tab and this is an IPFS file that ends up being an MP4, and then you can play the video. Well, theoretically at least. And so all these things, even though this is a video and this is a picture and that's a book and this is a meme and this is a 3D object, like the mechanics are exactly the same. It's just opening a tab and navigating to another URL.
Yeah.
And and this is just displaying an image. So that can be a still image, an animated GIF, it can be a 3D rendered canvas. The mechanics haven't actually changed. You're just changing the implementation slightly. And it all flows from just these two fields. Is just like, this is what the icon should look like, and this is what should happen when you click on it. And so I'm really thrilled about the simplicity of the mechanics and then all the variation that you can do from just those two simple fields.
Yeah, excellent.
Awesome.
Chris, is it good to have token type field? Like it will be nice if you know what type of content is this icon, so you will know what kind of viewer you require. Like for example, if in this case you put like a token type GLB, it will know, okay, I need a GLB viewer to show this token.
Right. Yeah, because right, the URL itself doesn't define that, right? It is just the
I think
content.
there was something with IPFS URLs. There was something about the content, but I forgot. But yeah, it will be. I don't know. It maybe will be nice to have even optional, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I think because that opens the door to so much variation, I think that that's worthy of its own specification. Like again, my gut instinct here is to put it into this JSON LD. Like we'd have another specification that's similar to like the Locat ID spreadsheet, where if it's a 3D model file and you want to specify the viewer, then like all that information could just go up into a lookup table, and then the link to the lookup table could go into this
But-
JSON LD field.
I mean, if you have a token type, you can make this logic work on the front end. You don't need to save the links to your viewer in your token. If you have like a tip GLB, the front end can choose what kind of viewer to attach to this type.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if it's like
Yeah, see, and that's the thing is the trade-off there is by over specifying you can have a better user experience, but you're also injecting an opinion on like GLB file should use this viewer, as opposed to like you can use whatever viewer you want, just put the URL right here and you're good to go.
Yeah, but the user can configure on his front end what kind of viewer he can use. You just specify the type of this token. So it can be like 3D, video, audio, text, just these 3 or 4. And it will know, okay, it's video, so I need some kind of video software.
Yeah, to me, if I was trying to, I'm thinking about OwnRare and how I would attach this and where I would get the data. If I had to query that, look at the data type, and then decide, it'd be a lot more work than just having it available. Now, it could go into user data or JSON LD, right, as a protocol type, but it should go somewhere so that the system doesn't have to query it and pull it down before it decides. That's my own take as well.
Yeah, those are really good takes, and they're really good input. I'm not sure what the right answer is in terms of
right.
I'm really wary of over specifying, but I get that even if we just did a handful of these use cases of video, 3D objects, pictures and music, or whatever, pick a handful of use cases, and make it easy to specify that stuff. So let's keep thinking about that, because I really think like that is probably worthy of its own specification, where we could specify all that stuff and just be like, we really recommend that you put this data into the JSON LD area.
Right, it's a required field anyway, but it doesn't have to have anything in it. If you put something in it, it'll help so people know to at least look there.
Yeah, because we definitely need to think about the default behavior if no one specifies anything. And in fact, a good example of that might be this NFT creator app at nft-creator.fullstack.cache. I tried to make this as simple as possible. So the only required fields is the name and the ticker. You don't even need a token icon. And so if you fill out these 2 fields and hit create token, it'll create a token. And then you'll figure out pretty quick that your token's pretty boring without an icon. And then if you want to get advanced, there's this drop down where you can start to specify the category and the tags and extra immutable and mutable data. And these go into that user data field. But I don't want, so it's like, but to get to onboard people, it should be like the minimum number of clicks and the minimum amount of information that they need to get going. And so the specification is really a reflection of this. Sort of design principle, I guess, of trying to be as unopinionated as possible, but leave the door open to injecting opinion, pretty much in these 2 fields.
Yeah, I can see user data and JSON as doing that. It would just have to be something that other people agree upon, like, okay, we're going to make 3D assets for our virtual world, and everybody that creates a 3D asset, put it in the user data until we get to a point that it's like the NFT creator type of thing is an inbuilt game thing. And as you're building, you can choose, do I want to create this as an NFT? Yes. Okay. And then at that point, you would probably have a specific schema for that world. And then you'd enter something in the JSON LD or the user data that says, this is a rhombus, and this is shape type 111, whatever, and they've agreed upon that. And we, like, you haven't designated that everything that's going to be a shape type rhombus needs to put shape type rhombus at the top of this thing.
Mhm.
So, but then it does, the counter argument is that, all right, that world is interoperable, but what if we wanted things to come and go? Could we have a schema where it says, all right, shape type, like just take shape type as being a 3D object shape type, so what that would tell me as what basically what that would tell Babylon or 3JS, say shape type, and we bring it in, it goes, all right, it gets a basic mesh material, right?
Mhm.
So we don't need to worry about anything else. It's not specifying anything, just like, so that could be something where it does help down the line, but that, who knows?
Mhm.
Because that could help with interoperability between worlds, but we don't even know how these worlds are going to be built and how they're going to be interoperable. So,
And we still don't know how tokens in general are going to be used. Like,
yeah,
we can definitely come up with some pretty cool use cases, but I think that the field of use cases that we haven't even thought of is much larger.
Right.
I'd agree.
That's why I'm so hesitant about like injecting opinion.
I think you're probably right, and you could use the user data. I can see what Stoyan's saying, just having something at the top that's like, it's a movie, 3D object, audio file, or text. Like,
Yeah, I really like the idea of,
because I've done this and I already hit this wall when I'm trying to create an NFT component, universal one like NFT.
yeah,
When you get just URL, you don't know what exactly HTML tag to use to display this URL. And
Good
then
point.
if you have just these three types like audio, video, and something, in case of video, you will put something. In case of image, you will just use image HTML tag. So
yeah. I really, what I hear you saying, Stoyan, that I really like is that, like, if we had a recommended way of rendering the content up front, then when the user creates the token, they don't have to think about that part. They can just create an NFT that's a music file or a video file or an image. And then if the sort of recommended way of rendering it is baked into this, then that's one less thing for the user to think about, and it keeps the user experience really consistent. I mean, am I echoing you?
yeah, but
correctly?
it's even not so detailed. Like you don't know to specify music. It's
Mhm.
audio. So you will need something for your ear, and it's video. Just this one. You don't need to have a deep specification like a voice or music or something.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
just audio. So the viewer will know, okay, I need to send the sound.
Mhm.
Video, I need to display something. So I think it's more like upper level than describing what exactly content is this. It's
Mhm.
more like what kind of output you will need, like speaker or screen,
Mhm.
like something like this, or in case of 3D, maybe goggles, or I don't know.
I think it's, what he's saying is that for people developing on the front end to not have to go to the URL and find out what it is every
Yeah.
time.
Pull it down, you look at it,
Yeah.
and
Literally
yeah.
go, oh, this is a video file. I'm going to put this over here with the videos. Oh, that's audio. I need some sort of sound player. Oh, that's a text file. I'll find a place to put it. So like, instead of, because if you're dealing with like hundreds, if you get to where you're dealing with hundreds, you don't want to be like, okay, that's video, go back. Okay, that's audio, go back. To simply go, all these are audio. I'm going to put them over here and then figure out how to work with them. All these are 3D files. I'm going to put them over here and figure out how to work with them. Then you could go from there.
Yeah, I really like the idea. And so one way we could implement that, say, is like a field that's a string, and then the string has to have, audio, video, image, whatever we want to label them, but one of these options. But then it's like, what about all the things we haven't thought of yet? And so that's why I'm almost thinking like this should be its own specification.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that is clear that someday people will be coming up with things that are not aligned with our own current things. You know,
There's the obvious stuff, but it's
Right.
I'm just trying to think like how do you make a space for the non-obvious stuff, or really
Yeah, but
literally the
this-
things you haven't thought of or you
These
can't think of.
specifications, now it's just version 0, right? So the new versions are exactly for these changes
Right.
in the schema. So when you decide some initial like 4 objects, when there's something new around, like I don't know, lasers or something, you will just need to create the next version of the specification. And because we have
That's
the
good. That's a good
schema
point.
always on the top, the software will know, okay, these things it support this thing.
Yeah, and when it gets crazy, like, you know, someday when we use plasma art and it's actually in plasma in front of you, we want to make sure it doesn't
Or
burn.
I'm
the
thinking about
screen.
all those things they put in your head so you can directly interface with the computer. Like
Right,
that's like
Neuralink.
a whole new media. So yeah, the Neuralink stuff. Yeah. Like load the Neuralink.
Take over my hippocampus with something, right? I want to make sure it knows which part of my brain to attack.
This is really good. I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to keep the conversation going about this.
Yeah, great discussion. Wow, this is an important piece. Otherwise, we're all like, I would just start putting crap in there, and it won't align with anybody. So I have to start doing it now, but I want to follow so that we're already aligned. So we don't break things right at the beginning.
This is exactly what I want to share this with you guys and get this kind of feedback. This really is good feedback.
Yeah, what I mean, a lot of the reason I'm into this direction because of the metaverse stuff, WebXR, is it is very cheap to produce NFTs this way. Now, if we like what we're working on is how do we create some standard so that going forward, because the web is evolving into WebXR, it is evolving in, like some people call it the metaverse, but it is evolving into this interoperable thing between VR headsets, AR glasses, phones, desktops, your TV, your Raspberry Pi in the wall, your refrigerator, you know, like it's evolving into this thing. So how do we create interoperability in that? And then if we can lay the groundwork for people to create on top of that, then when they're creating 3D assets or they're creating audio assets to work with one another, they're automatically going to be interoperable. So it is very good that we think about this now and we're talking about it, because that if we lay it right, it'll just grow that way, and we won't have to, you know, go back and replace the foundation essentially.
Exactly. Well, just to wrap this up, I'll touch on some of the other areas that we're already familiar with. The not safe for work field. You know, again, that could have been something that gets buried in one of these other fields, but it's a Boolean, so it's either true or false, and it seems like just really important. So that's why I thought it should go up here. And then, you know, these fields are all optional. Just trying to give some sort of very high level context. But again, totally optional, so they don't even need to be used. And that's pretty much the spec. And I'm totally open to pull requests, and definitely we're going to keep this conversation going about how to specify a media type.
With the category there, so are those limited, like, or can people create their own categories?
It can be any string, but only one. So I mean, I figured that's kind of what I was thinking is like, you know, there can probably only be one category, but there can be many tags.
So if so the tags can help refine a search further. If so, like we can categories art, and then I can create tag, so that if I'm using something to search.
In fact, like I think it's like a subset of the tags. Like for example, you can have tags art and logo and something, and it will classify it again like this one. It's like
and this is even data that could be put into the JSON LD. You know, so this is what I was visualizing as I was coming up with this, is like, okay, well, if I have, really is the problem I was trying to solve is we've got a way to create tokens, but now we need a way to share tokens, because I think that's the hard side of the network, or people just naturally want to share. So we need to lean into that. And if you're going to share things, it's really nice to categorize them so that you can quickly, filter what you're interested in. Are you interested in news? Are you interested in 3D models? Are you interested in memes? So that was the idea.
Tags are also categorizing, like from what I remembered, like categories was the old way, like it was inspired by file folders, but on some some year somebody discovered the tags, which are more flexible way to describe the same thing, because you can put like something inside many tags.
Well, I look at tags as, and I really get this from like the creation of tag clouds. That was when tags really took off in my memory. And it's that it's you talk about structured data and unstructured data, and I think tags are right there on the edge between the two, where they're definitely structured because they're strings in an array, but they're sort of whatever you think applies. No, it might not necessarily be useful, but people really go crazy with the tags sometimes. And so that's where the concept of the tag cloud, I remember tags really taking off when people were able to create web pages with tag clouds so that you could visualize like, okay, if I'm interested in Bitcoin, I'm going to go to the tag cloud for Bitcoin, and then possibly drill down deeper and deeper in that cloud. So it's like all the items that are tagged with Bitcoin, but then there will be a tag cloud within the tag cloud that, so all the things that are in Bitcoin, like here's all the other tags. And so it's like by cloud, I mean like what's a subset within Bitcoin, like UTXO is like, if there's a large portion of the population that was tagged with UTXO, that word would appear bigger, but it'd be surrounded by all the other words. And so those are the two ways I've seen tags used, is tag clouds and search criteria. Other than that, I haven't really seen a whole lot of utility from tags, but those are pretty useful. And so, yeah, again, I hesitated over these. I was really thinking through the lens of displaying NFT, like making an NFT viewer, and how do we sort of make that easy. And so that's where I was coming with the category and the tags. And this seemed generic enough that it would be appropriate to be at a high level like this, because it's like, you don't have to use these. They're totally optional. And a category seems just really generic, but
I don't mind having category, the in tags can be more specific, but there's definitely stuff like sports category, like horses category. And so that when you're searching for this stuff, as it gets more and more voluminous, you can just be like horses, and then comes up with horses. But then like also if you have the tag that Stoyan's talking about at the beginning, you could search for the category horses and specify image, and then it would just give you all these tokens that have images of horses, and then of course you'd probably put safe for work, so that you can pull in the right
my
stuff.
point is that having like these two type of categorizing, what will happen, for example, if I have category art and I have tag sport, and I have in the same moment category sport and tags art? Are these like the same NFTs in the same subset, or they will be put in the different like?
I think of it as a hierarchy where the category is the primary, starting location, and then the tags are just metadata. It's just extra stuff to help you sort of refine your search down.
Okay, so on the viewer side, the main stuff will be category, and tags are just like, flavors.
Yeah, and the other thing is that this is mutable data, so it can be changed if the creator decides that they made a mistake. And this might be the more I'm thinking about it, this might be appropriate to, like you said, like a media type. It's the more I'm looking at this category and the tags, that seems to be appropriate high level, particularly if it's not required and it's mutable data, so it can be changed.
Yeah, that's the way I would take it. I feel like the idea of what is this is more important than a category personally. I feel like that is there's a clearer action to be taken by anybody generating a front end with that idea than the others.
Well, to continue on this point, I'm thinking from a search standpoint, because I do think what can happen because these tokens are so cheap, and we're talking about people tokenizing their social interactions, their media, the stuff they create, their photos, stuff like that. The question is, how do we search through that and being able to say images, and so that a search mechanism can just say, I'm throwing out every token that doesn't have the image tag or the image in the mutable data. Not going to look at anything else. And then it can go, all right, look at the tags. Is it image, and does the tag have horse, and is it safe for work? And so then it's going to pull in those, kind of like Google does now, but the difference is it's all tokens, right? And that people can find ways to change things. They can find their own ways of paying, or you're even able to say, hey, I really like this picture of the horse, I want to use it on my website, and this is owned by this person, this address. I'm going to send them a message and say, can I use the picture, or can I send you some BCH so I can use the picture on the website? So really hard to do that right now. If I look up an image, I'm literally stuck until somebody contacts me and says, you don't have the copyright for this image. Meanwhile, I may want to get the copyright, but it's impossible. And so this is a little bit further than I was intending to go. The idea that we can search and we can pay for stuff and we can contact the owners, and having the image tag, having the 3D tag, having the video tag, makes it so that somebody doing a front end search can just filter out a bunch of stuff right then and there.
Aaron, if you mention this, maybe it's important then to have license tag like required. I know, because you want to know, can you do something with this image? Like if it's like common creatives, you can use it. If it's like proprietary, maybe license is important then to add to this specification.
Yeah, I've been putting my licenses in the user data, but I can see how that would be like a standard property that people would want to pull up,
If there's somewhere, like Aaron mentioned, if you have a way to see what kind of image is this and how you can use it, it's whatever. Like if it's in user data, it's okay. Just to have it will be good.
Right, having it, and make sure we create a specification that includes that, because I feel like that's one thing that I have not looked at yet at all. So does Chris, do all of your current ones have that data in the user data? Because I want to go back and look at what you have. I'd like to see what's there to follow that, because I feel like
let's see, I think I've got the decks up. Yeah, so here's the one that I was really focused on.
Yeah, I love how your stuff is working, and it really does work really well. It's simple. It's click. You've done a good job making, getting this. How do we actually view and see these things and test them?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's very much where we're at right now. So in the immutable data, I put a license field, and that was the thing is, if you pull up this particular license, I adapted this from a license that I got from an artist, like a physical visual artist, and it has wording in there that like it's perpetual. This agreement binds the purchaser and artist, their heirs and successors, for the life of the artist and their surviving heirs. Like, I don't have no idea if any of this is like legally
it's
legit.
a Creative Commons standard. This one on the top is the main URL.
Yeah, so it's adapted, and I don't like, because I was trying to sort of mash up like the Creative Commons license with the one I got from this artist. So it was like, well, you can share it, but if you own it, then you have to pay me a commission. Like if you actually own it and it changes hands, and you got to pay me a commission. It was really just an experiment. I don't really care. But shoot, where's that link at? Right here. So I put it in the immutable data because I didn't want it to change with time.
Right.
And so that's why I'm thinking the license field should go in the immutable data, because you wouldn't want to buy a token and then have the person who controls the mutable data like change the license.
Creator just change it on you. Yeah.
I mean, there'd be a record in the blockchain of that happening, but it'd be easy to miss.
But code is law, right? And we don't really know how that's going to shake out long term. Whether our code, changed, so you can't, I think it's a good idea to have it immutable, in my own take.
Yeah. So a license field in the immutable area. I like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, think about it today. I'm sitting here building a website, and it's like, I don't know if the images I'm getting are licensed. I don't know if I'm going to get dinged down the line because I accidentally use one that's not. And then you think about the problems with that on either side. The person that created the image, right now they're left to search the web for their instances that their image is used, and me, I have very little way of like contacting them besides I can maybe find if they got an email and send them an email and hope it doesn't go to their spam, and that's a ton of work. Whereas with a token, I can literally go, this token comes from this address. Let me send a message. Hey, I'd like to use this for my website. Is that okay?
Yeah, ideally, I'd like it to be that where you could just look up the address holding the token and send an end-to-end encrypted message to that address.
How much would it cost? They get back to me. Oh, it's it's going to be 50 cents or whatever, 0.002 BCH, whatever it is that at that point. Great, send it to you, and then in the mutable, that I could even purchase a token, and they could, in the mutable data, they could change it and say, oh, he has rights to use the image in this area. Like that's an issue right now that exists, that's solved by sites like Envato and these third-party sites that the artist sells their artwork to them, and then they take care of maintaining if that stuff is used, and they sell a license to you to use it. And so, yeah, that's cutting a lot of stuff out and making it a lot easier for people. And stuff like that it's not sexy. It really isn't, but it's needed.
Well, on that topic, and sort of as we're exploring some properties, this NFT I created. I was just playing around with some of these fields. Like I had already thought about tags apparently. But yeah, I added these other fields of like, is it for sale? Who's the current owner? And this is in the mutable data. So my thinking when I did this was that like, okay, if somebody buys this, then I'll go and because what they'll own is the token, and they'll be in possession and control of the token, but not the mutable data. As the artist, I will still retain ownership of the control over the mutable data. So I would update this to reflect the current owner, and then if it gets sold on a secondary market, if the new owner wants their information reflected here, they have to come to me because I control the mutable data.
Right.
And that's my opportunity to enforce the license and get a commission on the sale of the.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's important to me right now also because I'm looking at making sure that the creators do get at least 5% of after sales, and they have to have it somewhere to who to send it to. And I've been actually reaching out on Telegram to people that have created in the past to say, hey, I don't know if anything's going to sell, but I'd really like to make sure you get paid at least, even though you didn't specify this. I like to make sure we give at least 5% of sales to you.
Yeah. So, but this is a pretty specific use case. And so I'm thinking like this data definitely needs to go at a minimum in the user data field, but we could probably take it a step further and come up with an actual like JSON link data schema for it. Because even within the use case of a token that gets sold and, you know, what I just described, like there's going to be a lot of scenarios that we haven't even thought of in terms of, you know, the details that go into this section, you know, their address and their name and their contact info. And, you know, do you add a phone or is that silly? And like just all those details.
Fax number.
I have mixing feelings about this thing because in this case, it's not permissionless anymore. I need crisp permissions for everything. So this token is not exactly mine, in fact.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, because I control the token icon. I could change it out from under you.
I mean, the ownership part is a different thing, like the permissionless software, composability, usability. But once you create something ownership, I think I think it should be up to Chris for that. But that's my own take. You know, this is I love the perspective story. And that's really
so
good
what will be different, like putting the icon on the usual HTTP server? It's same. Somebody have control on it.
Yeah, right.
And that's why it depends on. So it's like we're trying to solve two problems here. We're trying to solve a generic problem for tokens, like all the things that a token could be, which is pretty much everything and anything.
Right.
Like that's a hard problem to solve. But then there's like specific use cases of tokens that we also, you know, should consider. You know, and like here's another good example: the content, because this is a video file, and the whole point of it was to share the video. So I didn't want just one location to get the info. I put an array of locations where you can get the data.
That's pretty amazing, actually, that this is possible, because right now there's so much that is just blocked. So this allows for like the flexibility and survivability.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the big powerful things about tokens. It's like, okay, well, pretty much everybody's going to go to YouTube because that's the most convenient. But if they decide to censor this particular video, well, you got 5 other options.
So to comment on what you said, Stoyan, one of the use cases for something mutable would be like, say, a social media following. People want to follow me. I give them a token or they buy a token, and I can update the mutability, which is just my new post every day. The difference is when they want to unsub, they can trade my token to somebody else. You know, it's a slight difference.
Aaron, I was not talking more about the content of this mutable data, but like case that you mentioned means that you always can put some comment inside this mutable file, and it will look like I'm written because I'm now the current owner, but you can alter my content and put like, oh, Stoyan is terrorist. So you're in Kotsi.
That makes sense. That's a great thought right there, right?
I can see that.
Perception is that the owner is the one writing it. That's not correct, right? So that's a good.
So yeah, in this case, like we're just shifting the ownership to this mutable data from the media itself. So
yeah, and we're really starting to shine a flashlight on the fact that like the icon is not the token. Like that's right. The perception, but that is not the reality.
Right.
But it can be, how to see, it can be future evolved, like IPFS SID on this thing can be added to the document hash of the token, and then it cannot be changed anymore. Yeah, so it will be a frozen token.
This is something like, I'm almost like, we could put the token icon in the immutable data, but then you can't change it, and that's a bummer.
I mean, for some use cases, if you want really how to see, if you want this data to be not changeable anymore, you can add the document like SID of this thing to the token document hash, So it will be proven that this mutable data will be never changed. So, and this will becomes like a frozen token or something. So nobody else will not be able to change it. But it's like use cases. We have just now the common framework which we can use for different use cases. But yeah,
that's really what it comes down to.
Chris, this is great stuff. I mean, this is a long discussion on this, but I really appreciate what you've done so far, because this is going to allow us to have an ecosystem that can be built out, and it doesn't have to be described by individuals and have to show up in this meeting. This is really nice.
Yeah, this is just the start of a very long conversation. And I'm glad to get your guys' feedback. I mean, really, like, if this is how, in my experience, standards do not go to the person who wrote the standard. Standards go to the people who adopt the standard. There's plenty of standards out there that people just don't follow. And there's plenty of things that have become de facto standards that are not written down, but they're the standard because that's what everybody does. And so, writing down a standard is just one step in a long journey. And but getting people to agree on it and actually implement it, that's where standards are really created.
And one other thing though too, Stoyan, like even with EVM tokens, the owner of the contract can change the content depending on how the contract was written. So that's another one where it's, tokens are fishy. They're not to make a pun on your trout token, Chris, but they literally change. That's how they do the token reveals, is they're literally changing the address of where that token is pointing at in the smart contract.
Yeah, but you can make your contract to not do this anymore. So, and because the token contract sources are on the Explorer, you can always check what this contract is doing. So there is always fishy contracts, but it's possible also with the EVM contracts to make them really immutable. If you just, make this token URL method to just point to specific SID, and it cannot be changed anymore. Yeah, it's possible with EVM too. I think if you go to NFT port.xyz, in their documentation, there's something like how you can do this. You can freeze your data or something.
Yeah, you could totally freeze.
What do you say? NFT port.xyz?
Yeah. So it's these guys, but you need, it's a little, but go to docs maybe, and they have some options that you can make your metadata really frozen, and then it cannot be changed anymore. And I think they're doing this by just making this token URI method just to always point to a constant SID, not to something like. But
yeah, so it's similar in nature, and they're creating both mutable and immutable sections.
Yeah, something like this one. And when you froze it, it will become just immutable. Something like this one. But yeah, so they also using these guys. They also using NFT storage, for real storage.
Oh,
and they're
cool.
just providing some kind of. They trying to be the middleman, like everybody, just to put their API in the middle. But they have some good stuff, like you can retrieve the NFTs per wallet and stuff like this, and do some IPFS magic, like the current one that we are talking about. So it's
Cool.
an interesting project. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on. That's been great feedback, and we'll continue to have these conversations. What I want to close with is just encouraging you guys and anybody who listens to this, go to the NFT creator, create a token, and then create a collection of NFTs, and just try it out. Give me feedback. I really want to see more people play with the collector. I'm going to start an address that's just anytime I see a news item that I want to these new items and the memes. I think it's just such a great way to capture this stuff. I mean, because there's more to it than just creating the token, right? You've got to basically prepare the data, upload it to IPFS. Like all these other tools we've built come into play here, like the pay to write database and the pinning cluster and all this stuff. But I'm just thinking of all the news items that happened during COVID and all the confusion around that. And now all the stuff that's happening with Ukraine and all the confusion around that, like at the very least, when you come across like a piece of interesting news, you can like save it for posterity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, what's going on in Ukraine?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm loving this, and I see this as once people understand easily to how to upload stuff to IPFS, and so right now you can just use the desktop client's great. So if anybody's watching this show and you don't want to do the CLI side, they have a desktop client. It runs on Go and it works great. And then it even allows you to preview stuff in the web browser. Brave also has one inbuilt. It's been in there for it'll be 2 years this January. They've had one inbuilt, and you can also connect your desktop client or your command line IPFS to your Brave client. You can go in and specify, I want to use that gateway. So there's lots of different ways to utilize IPFS, and then it literally makes it so that you can this goes to IPFS. So like you can go this file, drag drop, it's on IPFS. Now I have the BAFI, and then I'm going to put it into the token information, token data. So
yeah,
for anybody that's wondering out there, and feel free to message us too if you like really want to know, how do I get onto IPFS? How do I best use it? And you can even do it on mobile through Termux. So there is an IPFS client on Termux on mobile. So there we go.
Yeah. So I put the creator and the collector under the token dex section, and now that things are sort of, we've got a way to create tokens, a way to share tokens, a way to buy and sell tokens. My focus for the next few months is to wrap up between now and the end of December is going to be to wrap up the eCash grant, fork all of this DEX stuff over to eCash, which also means I'm going to be forking the pay to write database. So we'll have one that operates on the Bitcoin Cash chain and one that operates on the eCash chain. That's going to be really interesting. And I want to return to that here, but I want to get through these other couple tech updates. So just a couple other things worth mentioning. The pinning service, the pay to write database pinning cluster for it. I've added some documentation there. Let's see if I can pull that up. There's one of these, yeah, the pinning service. So it's under developer docs. Most of these repositories, they have a directory called dev docs. And so it's just I just updated the specification as to, basically the steps that happen. And this is all reflected in so this is an NPM library. P2WDB is the JavaScript NPM library that you can download. And so if you're doing a front end or back end or whatever, this lets you read and write data to the database. So this is just the GitHub repo for that. In the README, I added example code on how to pin generic JSON data to IPFS using our pinning service. So this is needed when you're creating the immutable or immutable data for a token. It's not good enough just to upload it to the pay to write database. You actually need an IPFS CID for that. So this is a new service that it offers. And so you can pin both the CID. There's creating the data on IPFS. So it's just taking raw JSON, uploading it to IPFS and getting a CID back. And then the second step is pinning that CID so that it's available on the network. So there's a two-step process here. And so going back to the agenda, the documentation here just describes sort of how that works. And then the example code I just showed has, walks you through how to do that. And this is all the stuff that's happening under the hood in that NFT creator app. When you create it, it's doing these things in order to create that immutable data, pin them to the IPFS network, and attach that data to the new token that you're creating.
That's awesome. That's really cool, man.
We've got a pretty complete solution now. Like there's just like everything, you can do everything from creating tokens and uploading data IPFS and using it within your app. Like you can use PSF tools for all that. You can pay for all of it in BCH. So it's, I'm hoping that these will gain in popularity and help developers such as yourselves just build useful apps.
Absolutely.
With this pinning service, can you pin like already uploaded data? Like, for example, you usually use some like service like NFT storage or something. You upload your file there and you get some SID, and maybe you want just to pin it in the pay-to-write database. Is it?
Yeah. So what I do is, so let's take this CID for example. My personal workflow is I'll upload it to web3.storage, and that's like the initial upload, but they're not really good on they're not very responsive. And so that's why I want to pin it to an IPFS node. But this in PSF BCH wallet, if you bring up the help, one of the new commands in there is this pay-to-write database pin command. And let me bring this up. And so it takes two arguments. It takes the name of the wallet that's going to pay in Bitcoin Cash. You don't need any PSF tokens. And although it's cheaper if you have PSF tokens. And the name of the wallet and then the CID. So if I wanted to pin that file.
Will it look to see if you have PSF and use that first? Yeah,
exactly. It will. So I have a wallet called Pin that I use to do this. And then, so it's just that, and then it goes through and it will issue, I think my node modules, what happened there? Cannot find. Well, I'm not going to go into this, but this is the syntax here is you just, a wallet to pay for it. And then you give it the CID. And as long as it's under a megabyte, that's the current limitation of our pinning service. It has to be under a megabyte. And then, like you said, Aaron, so if you have PSF tokens in the wallet, it will consume those. And if you don't, it'll leverage this new feature where basically you pay 10% extra, but then you don't have to have any PSF tokens. You're essentially paying the server to burn the tokens for you.
Oh, that's great. Because I think that most wallets that I'm using are going to have a little tiny bit, maybe enough, but I think they'll definitely all have BCH.
Yeah, it removes that's a huge source of friction of requiring somebody to have a PSF token. So Okay, so last thing I really want to cover with you guys is, I was hoping to get the VIP bot working and have this discussion in the VIP room, but I'm thinking about switching from, in fact, we have a full discussion here. I'm thinking about switching from merit, which is what we've used before, where you hold your PSF tokens, and then your merit is the number of tokens times the number of days that they haven't moved. That's been really hard for people to wrap their heads around. It's difficult to code, and it's problematic in that it's very computationally intensive. And the reason one big reason I did it that way was just because we could. Nobody had ever done it that way. It seemed like a good idea to try out. And one reason we didn't take the simple path, which is just create a governance token, is we didn't want to open ourselves to the situation where someone could just buy a bunch of governance tokens and basically take over the PSF just, with money. And watching some of these videos, particularly Yearn DAO, talk about their governance, that scenario, I've never seen that scenario play out. The one case I can think of is when Justin Sun tried to take over. What was that? It was like a blockchain, but it was for content, and he sort of took it over, and they ended up forking the chain.
Right.
Oh, it wasn't DTube. What
it was? Yeah, it was like some
And
medium. It was like
it turned into
a long
Hive.
form
It
Hive.
turned into the Hive blockchain.
Yeah. And so I think and we're just not seeing this problem of because that's what you do in the event of a hostile takeover. The person doing the hostile taking over like loses all their money because people are just like, no, we're going to fork this.
Right. It's all open source. You just fork it.
Yeah. And so I don't think that that's a serious concern. And also the other thing that I really took away from watching Yearn talk about their DAO is nobody gets to tell anybody else what to do in the DAO. That's not a privilege that the government's token gives you. The only privilege it gives you is to vote and propose things to be voted on, but people aren't required to do something just because it's been voted on. At every step of the way, people have to volunteer and be incentivized. So I just don't see it as a serious, or I just haven't seen any evidence to suggest that it's a concern any more than like a theoretical concern. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? And the other thing, before I get your thoughts, the other reason for doing it this way is it just makes everything simpler. There's models that we can follow, like computationally coding simpler, like conceptually simpler. There's lots of models that we can follow. And so what I'm thinking is we would have an NFT that is a governance token, and you'd purchase them for 1,000 PSF tokens. And now that we have the DEX, we have a secondary market for these NFTs. So like we would never under any conditions ever buy the NFT back. We only sell them. And but if someone becomes disgruntled and they're stuck with these governance tokens they don't want anymore, they can sell them on the DEX. No guarantee what they're worth. It would just be market dynamics. But anyways, that's where my head's at. What are your guys' initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to change it. I think the other one's been a little too confusing for people, but I don't know who else has tried but didn't get successful in purchasing or collecting to be able to get merit. So I mean, it's if they don't seem to reach out and ask questions. So I don't know. Over
the last couple of years, I've had a couple non-technical people just get incredibly confused. They were trying to hold their tokens in Electron Cash, but then Electron Cash is an HD wallet, so it moves the tokens and destroys the merit every time you spend it. And so it's like, no, don't. It's just
explaining HD wallets is like, wait a minute, okay,
yeah. I think making it simple is the best way to go, especially wanting to get users that are non-technical. And it's hard enough to get them to understand the money's not in your wallet, which is weird because people use credit cards and you're not thinking that all my bank account is in my wallet because my credit card is in it, but
the other thing is you've got this ability now to display them. So that is a more of like, I have a spot and I can send you, here's my governance token, right? Before you go, I've got a number that says more than 800, it's just, I think there is now a sort of like physical feeling of owning it much more.
Yeah. You can pull up a web page and you can count, like I have 5 tokens.
Well, and you're using React Native too, right, Chris? So somebody, if they wanted, could essentially have it on their phone if they really want an app. Although I think we're going away from that, but
yeah. Well, we've got the wallet app, and so if you can send your NFT to your wallet app or a paper wallet, which is what I always recommend, that people store their tokens on paper wallets.
Or the plastic card wallets.
Yeah.
That you engrave.
Yeah.
With a laser.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you recommend. I still got to get one of those and do that.
Yeah, I'll send you one. The problem is like I can never guarantee that I don't have the private key, right? Because I created it. So
No, you don't need to set. I need to get a laser engraver and
Yeah.
create it. You know.
yeah.
So just blindfold yourself and then put the sticker over.
I'm
Tamper
actually
proof.
I'm going to that Bitcoin Cash conference in November, and I rather than buy business cards, I just decided to make my own by engraving them into those plastic cards. So it's funny
Nice.
because they're pretty thick. So anybody who takes one, they're gonna know they have my card because your wallet's gonna get a lot stiffer.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, anyways, like I'm not going to make any changes drastically, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring it up and just let you guys know it's coming. I mean, unless there's like some really clear reason not to do it, it makes everything else easier for us just to. And then, like I said, that what I'm thinking of in the spirit of keeping it simple is it'd be an NFT, it'd be 1,000 PSF tokens, and
Maybe it will be clever to buy like a membership NFT, and the amount when you pay, it will update your mutable data with the amount that you paid. So then it will be not like you buy it for 1,000. You can still like put more in this, and when you sell it, all of this power will go to the other guy. So inside the mutable data, it can be something like level, like voter level 1, 2, 3, and it depends. And you can purchase the next level.
Yeah.
You can just update this NFT with the new mutable data, how much you paid until now, and this will be your vote power. So you don't need to buy several one if you want more power.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do it that way. It's sort of getting away from the simplicity. One problem I want to.
Then you cannot sell just part of your power. If you buy two, you cannot sell the one. So
that's interesting.
But yeah, it's something to think about.
Yeah, one potential attack vector is this, like the secondary market. If there ends up being a lot of these NFTs on the market and they're significantly lower than but again, like that goes us back to the original attack vector we discussed, where it's like, what are you really buying when you buy one of these governance tokens? Like it's definitely not the right to tell anybody what to do.
But if you expire them like every year or something.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You can maybe do something with this secondary market, something. Like
that's something
every year they will be issued the next NFT token to the current owners or something. I don't know what exactly, but
the other big problem I'm trying to solve is the VIP room. We need to have some way where the people with skin in the game can and also the token price, it's on an exponential curve. So as we generate more cash flow, the PSF token will get more expensive. Acquiring 1,000 PSF tokens will become more and more difficult and expensive. And but really my main concern, the number one problem I'm trying to solve is that VIP room. Is like, I have a token, I have skin in the game, I have the right to talk, and other people don't, and so we don't need to listen to them in this one particular chat room.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And that's where like the merit was kind of like it solved the problem, but it was a very complex and computationally intensive way to solve it,
and confusing to the user because they don't know what the heck to buy, right? So it's both those things.
Right. There was especially when we first started doing it, there was a lot of people that were like super excited about the idea, but then they would do something silly that would destroy their merit, and they get very upset about it.
So the other thing is that it's pretty standard right now to have an NFT access to certain things. So this would start to open that capability for our NFTs. So we'd be putting out, because that's pretty standard in EVM. So I'd like to see these type of things that are kind of course we have that in EVM brought to us.
Yeah, and we can, I mean, that's the thing is, especially if we don't do the simple NFTs, if we do the group token and the NFT thing, then we have that nice way to track the NFT holders and do airdrops like POAPs and yeah, I mean, but also it's just like there's a reason why everybody does it this way, why they have a governance token and then their fungible token.
Right.
And that just seems to be the standard, for several very good reasons.
So I believe that's the right way to go. That's my own take. So I appreciate it, and it simplifies.
Okay. Appreciate the feedback, guys. Okay, well, is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap it up?
Now really just working on code, trying to work on a website here.
Yeah, coding every day, right? I think
Good.
it's really good stuff, and appreciate the tools you guys have built. Can't wait to see what Aaron, the rest of your stuff someday.
Yeah, we're got to dig into Babylon JS and 3JS are slightly different in their terminology, but they kind of do the same thing. So I know a little bit more about 3JS. I'm kind of going through tutorials to understand and learn more. And then we just have to figure out, okay, well, do we probably create a React component with a GLB viewer in it, but then if you're going to have a world, it's probably going to be flipped where it's 3JS or it's Babylon JS, and then React is inside of that instead of the other way around, so that you come to it and like you have a world, but then you still want to be able to use a wallet, and that wallet runs on a React, app. So how do you pull that React page up in a 3D world? Okay, well, maybe we have a window here, and it's a simple plain. Anyways, lots of stuff to think about, and dealing with the mechanics of the world, and then working in WebXR and getting it to work on every platform. So
nice. All right. Well, I got some really valuable, you guys can't see that, but I took notes on, I'll probably release a new version of the token schema spec based on your feedback today. So, and then we'll keep that conversation going.
awesome.
So, all right, guys, you have a good day. Appreciate you taking the time. We're all a lot better for it. I'm really excited about the trajectory we're on with these tokens and the DEX and just solving problems. I think if we keep doing this, it's not going to take very long for the rest of the world to take notice that, hey, we've got something here that is valuable and solves a lot of problems.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
And it's affordable for even like almost anyone can afford 1/10 of a cent or 2/10 of a cent or a penny or so to do any of these things, which isn't the case in many, many other ecosystems.
Exactly.
Yeah. You want to build worlds, you need those transactions got to be cheap, and the data storage has to be cheap. And then you got to solve the concurrency problem too, so I mean, that gets into talking about consensus mechanisms on databases and stuff like that. But I don't, not such a big issue. If you and I are engaged, concurrence is probably going to be a given. But then it is a different issue if Aaron wants to jump in our world. How do we solve that concurrency problem? And the data he has, there was a big red balloon in there last time he left, and we popped it while we were playing. So like those are weird issues we got to solve. But
don't pop my balloon, baby.
Yeah, I don't want to pop your balloon. They're weird issues we got to solve.
Yeah,
token stuff really makes a lot of sense. It helps with that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but anyways.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, cheers, guys. I'll see you